The U.S. tobacco industry is dominated by three giants: Philip Morris, maker of the world's most popular cigarette, Marlboro; the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company; and Brown and Williamson, part of the British American Tobacco Company. Science and technology have played a key role in their success. The cigarette was a handmade agricultural item until a rolling machine transformed it into a mass-market product late in the 19th century. A modern factory can turn out more than 500 million cigarettes a day. The product is a high-tech blend of Virginia, Burley, and Oriental tobacco leaves. These are combined with shredded tobacco sheet, a paper-like material made out of scraps and stems. And there are chemical additives by the dozen. These are used to alter flavor, burn, even nicotine absorption. While additive-free cigarettes are often thought to be safer, the combustion of tobacco alone produces most of what's harmful. Today's cigarettes deliver much less tar and nicotine than those of a few decades ago. The effort to reduce tar was stimulated by the 1964 Surgeon General's report, which provided government validation of the link between illness and smoking.
When the industry saw that smokers were increasingly health conscious, the industry felt that it had no choice but to try to come up with some kind of modification to the product that could suggest to smokers, if the companies couldn't make it express in their ads, that the product was safer.
It was accepted throughout the public health community that the toxicity of cigarette smoke was related to the quantity of tar and nicotine taken into the lungs. A relatively simple way to reduce the dose was to reduce the amount of tobacco in a cigarette and to speed up the burn with chemicals. More porous paper and the addition of vent holes around the filter further thinned the smoke by mixing it with air. And so the low tar or light cigarette was born.
And they didn't have to say it was safer. They knew that smokers believed that light cigarettes were less harmful and less addictive.
So that brands could be compared, the Federal Trade Commission developed a standardized procedure to measure tar and nicotine. Tar is a gross measurement of everything in the smoke except nicotine and water. Figures from the smoking machines spurred vigorous competition for lower numbers. Between 1965 and 1980, average nicotine and tar yields were brought down from 37 to 14 milligrams of tar, and from 2 to 1 milligram of nicotine. Today, lights make up the majority of all cigarettes sold. But once again, things haven't turned out as they were expected to. People, it has been found, don't smoke like machines. As tar and nicotine levels drop, smokers smoke more, and the design of the cigarette makes it easier.
The cigarette companies, they realized that if you didn't get a certain amount of tar, it wouldn't taste good. And if you didn't get enough nicotine, you'd go into nicotine withdrawal. What the companies did was make the cigarettes with greater elasticity or flexibility. And flexibility is a word that you see in a lot of the tobacco industry literature, a flexible dosing system. And if you watch a smoker that's trying to get more nicotine, they push it in a little bit more, they suck a little harder. And when they get down near the end, they're holding it, they're covering up those holes.
The results have been disastrous for public health.
If you look at the history of the tobacco industry, it's a very, very bad one. The industry came out with light cigarettes in the 70s. And did we get a reduction in heart disease? No. People only smoked more intensely and more deeply and died at the same rates of heart disease. And as people sucked deeper, the cancer only went from high up here, down here, and there was no change in lung cancer. So the industry cannot be driving the train. The train has to be driven by regulatory authorities who use science to establish meaningful controls over product design.
Today, half of Philip Morris's research and development budget is said to be focused on reduced-risk products. It's an effort that was already underway in the mid-1970s, when secret work began on a radically different strategy to clean up cigarette smoke.
We found out very early from just doing experiments on heating stuff at various rates, fast, slow, that tobacco actually doesn't just break down entirely and it's gone.
The toxic compounds are produced at different temperatures. Some of the worst, like PAHs and carbon monoxide, occur at the highest. Cliff Lilly's team at Philip Morris developed a variety of experimental devices to control the heat used to vaporize tobacco.
And we tried lots of things that some sound silly at this time in my life. Flashbulbs. A flashbulb cigarette I once really liked. One would put a flashbulb in the front of the cigarette, hit a switch, the flash would go off, and you would get a very nice puff coming from heated tobacco. There were a number of that type of thing, coils of wire that we had hooked to a battery, and you heated the tobacco with the coil of wire. You walked a very narrow path. If you put too much heat in, the tobacco caught on fire. And then you had a very sophisticated regular cigarette. You might as well lit it with a match or a lighter. If you put too little heat in, it was like, toast coming out of your toaster. You really got no smoke, and it smelled toasted. And so it was very, very difficult to control the amount of heat.
But efforts to create an electrically heated cigarette were cut back due to technological limitations or possibly the threat of litigation. In the meantime, the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company had gone to work on its own heated product. The maker of Camels and Winstons hoped the company could reverse its declining fortunes with a revolutionary new reduced hazard product that barely used tobacco at all.
One experiment that was done early on was just to determine how we could deliver smoke that was completely non-toxic. So we devised some cigarettes that were made of glass for demonstration purposes. They had glycerin coated on the inside of the glass. Glycerin is simply a compound that will evaporate or vaporize when heated and then condense very readily to form a smoke, to form particles suspended in a gas. So then the challenge was to take that basic system and then make that acceptable to smokers by developing some type of tobacco flavor, tobacco taste, and as well as provide some nicotine to the smoker.
The new product, called Premier, would use a unique technology to deliver the nicotine. But it was designed to look like a traditional cigarette.
Premier was an interesting device. It looks like a cigarette, but the ends you see this white ring that's fiberglass, and the black dot is a fuel element. And if I take out the fuel element with these tweezers, it's attached to this aluminum cylinder. The aluminum cylinder, in turn, contains little beads of alumina that have nicotine and glycerin on them. And these beads are heated by the fuel element when it's lit, and nicotine and glycerin vaporizes off of these beads and then is condensed into an aerosol that can deliver nicotine deep into the lungs.
Because the development of Premier was so different, we did have to develop new flavor systems. We worked with all the major flavor houses in the world. It turns out that was an exceedingly difficult project to design those types of flavor systems.
One problem was that until the flavor capsule heated up, the only taste was sulfur from the match and burning charcoal. The effort to fix Premier's taste was documented in a best-selling book and television movie.
Now, 8% of that group sampled at least one Premier to give us their opinion of the product.
Bottom line?
Well, of all the groups we tested, the response to Premier was just about uniform.
Mm-hmm. They all said they tasted like
Was the consensus, yes, sir.
Premier was introduced in the autumn of 1988 and came with instructions to use a butane lighter. The effort had been the most ambitious yet to create a reduced-risk product. Reynolds expected applause, but that's not what happened.
The American Medical Association says these are not cigarettes, but a sophisticated drug delivery system which gives smokers strong hits of nicotine, a drug the AMA says is so addictive it wants smokeless cigarettes banned.
Consumers were equally unenthusiastic with what was dubbed a smokeless cigarette.
Nothing. Zero. It's like smoking blackboard chalk.
Another first for American technology. No wonder the Japanese are trembling.
R.J. Reynolds has announced it's bailing out of its smokeless cigarette project, but then those smokers who tried Premier apparently didn't like it anyway.
After only a few months, Reynolds withdrew Premier. But the story wasn't over.
In the meanwhile, what had emerged was the secondhand smoke issue. There was, across the country, a wave of local ordinances. You can't smoke in public buildings, you can't smoke in public places, you can't smoke here and there. And they were sitting there with this product. It occurred to them that if this product didn't produce a lot of smoke as well, you would solve this other problem.
It took 6 years and a total cost of nearly $1 billion. But Premier was reborn as Eclipse.